partnering with us and a little bit of background on the Sage HRMS solution. Then we're going to dive right into what are the common challenges we found with Sage 300 CRE payroll users that don't have an HR component. So these are things we've heard over the years that seem to be reoccurring themes. And then we're going to switch back and forth between discussing some of these issues, and then we're going to jump into the software and do a show you kind of demonstration today to give you an idea of the depth of the product and how it might benefit your organization. And then we're going to end with a little discussion about how the information flows between the two systems and how that can save your group time and money and reduce the duplicate entry there. And at the end, we'll save some time for questions and answers. And so if you can hold those till the end, or if you want to type them in the box as they occur to you at the end, we should have time to go through and review these. So a little bit about my organization, Delphia Consulting. Alliance, being the experts that they are in the construction and real estate, recognize that their clients have HR needs as they have employees, but they really wanted to make sure that they're providing a level of service like they provide with the expertise they have in the construction and real estate. So they decided to partner with our organization to provide the sales support and software implementation and consulting services for this. This is our primary focus of our organization, employee-based systems. And we're a development partner for the Sage Employer Solutions Group. One of the products we'll take a brief look at today is a product we developed, which are the electronic forms. But we have consultants all over the U.S. And a little bit of my background, I'm a former payroll manager who learned HR back in 1999 when I bought, the organization I was working with bought a, now part of Sage Group, the Sage Abra at the time, or it was the Abra Suite. So I've got a lot of experience on both sides of the desk, and for the last 9 or so years I've been working with other clients like yourselves, trying to determine if the solution is a good fit for various groups out there. Our consultants that work with the product and the implementation and training have an average tenure of about 14.2 years experience with the product. Many of them are, like myself, former users of the system. Our staff has senior professional human resource, certified payroll professionals on staff as well. So we really have walked out there in your shoes and have experienced some of the pains that your group has gone through regarding managing their employees. So a little bit of history about the system itself. It was initially developed in the mid-'80s. The name of the system at that time was Abracadabra, if you can believe that. It was really the first human resource management system developed by HR professionals to meet their needs for the small to medium-sized employer. And in software terms, that's really about under 5,000 employees is considered a small to medium-sized business there. Until this time, the product, really, you didn't see HR components unless you were a very large employer and had a big ERP system. Sometimes we saw placeholders for HR data in payroll fields and stuff, but over the years the landscape has really changed, and there are many, many systems out there. And that's wonderful that the market has evolved, but I would ask you to stop and think about how many of those are really going to be around in the next 10, 20, or even 30 years. The Sage Abracadabra, now known as Sage HRMS, is part of the Sage software family. So this system is going to be around for a long time, and it's evolved over the years and continues to evolve and innovate to support the ever-changing needs of our organizations out there to manage their employees throughout that entire life cycle, from hire to rehire, retire, but in construction it's oftentimes hire, layoff, rehire. So we want to talk about this life cycle. The core of the system is the centralized HR database, and we're going to really focus on that today. There's other modules available out there depending on what issues you're trying to solve. You may be interested in web-based recruiting and onboarding or paperless HR forms, or you may just really want to focus in on some centralized HR functions and capabilities out there. This is one of the beauties of the Sage HRMS system, that you purchase what you need when you need it. So if you don't need a recruiting component now, you don't have to purchase it now. But if your situation changes in the next few years and all of a sudden you guys are in a heavy recruiting state, or online benefits enrollment makes sense at that point, you can add those things at any time. But for today's purposes, we're really going to focus primarily on the core HRMS functionalities and also look at some of the capabilities to manage training. So over the last 9 years that I've worked with a lot of clients that use the Sage 300, or formerly known as Timberline Payroll, you know, it is a great system. It's a wonderful ERP system, and it does a great job paying our employees and doing our job costing. But when I speak with these employers, I often hear that many of them are facing the same kind of challenges when it comes to managing their workforce. So this slide represents the top 6 that I've seen over these last 9 years, and in discussions with our friends here at ASG, they've come up, again, really reporting on the same type of things. Our employers are having problems, you know, having a complete employment record, or managing their benefits, things like that. So we're going to go ahead and take a dive in exploring each one of these topics, and we'll go back and forth between kind of a review on these challenges and looking at the way that the system manages those. Okay, so first, we're going to go ahead and start out with our employee record, a complete employee information. So, you know, as I mentioned earlier, in construction, we often see a hire, layoff, rehire, rinse, and repeat. So having multiple rehire dates is very critical in there. And, you know, I'm going to jump into the product in just a minute, and I want to take just a moment to give a little shout out to the fact that what we're going to see in the demonstration system that I have is just that. It's a demonstration system. I've done some configuration in it that makes sense for a demonstration environment. Please know that each implementation is done to really reflect the specific organization we're setting the system up for. And so just because I have my demonstration system configured in one way doesn't necessarily mean that's the only way to have it set up in the system. And part of the sales process where we work with clients to really find out what they need, we configure the system to reflect that. So when I talk about the employee information here, again, these topics here, have we got all of the information we need to get the employee entered in the system and captured all of the critical data that we need? As changes occur to their wages, transfers, promotions, are we capturing all of that? So let's take a moment to go into the Sage HRMS system. And so I'm here at our welcome page, and I'm just going to close that and go in and look at an employee record here. So I have now, if you can see up here where my mouse is covering, we've got our Personnel tab. Okay, so it has several different screens of data in it under the Personnel tab. So as you can see, we start out with our demographic information, personal information on the employee, and you'll note over here I've got an area where I'm collecting EEO information. So we've got EEO information on the employee side and then on the employer side, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But we've got a place to capture this data. I don't have a photo link to this employee here in my demonstration system, but we can do so. We also have the ability, as I mentioned previously about having multiple dates in this system. I think with the Sage 300, we've got a hire date, a termination date, and a rehire date. So we'll look at our job history in just a moment, but as we can see in the HR status record, we can do things like have an adjusted seniority date. So if you have employees that, and you've got an organizational policy where you can allow them to keep some of their seniority once they come back, we can do some specialization there as far as that's concerned. Employment eligibility information, here we've got an employee, yes, we verified their I-9. What documents did we use to verify that information? Military information if we're doing our VETS 100. And I want to point out here, we've got some user-defined fields which exist on current screens that we can utilize for various different reasons. These are just labels that get changed really to reflect how your organization is set up. So that's HR status. Termination, as would indicate, we can document what the termination or layoff date is, if they're eligible for rehire, all of those good things. We've got an event screen where we can track some personal events or professional events for the employee, do some notes, attach documents, multiple emergency contacts for employees. One of the things that we just had talked about was this employee record, being able to track information specifically in greater detail here. So one thing that's a little bit different in the HRMS system is how we can report on employees' pay information. And so in my demonstration system, I've got this particular employee in this company is on a biweekly pay frequency, and the standard number of hours per pay period are 80. And the reason I bring this up is it's important to note that in a system like this, we can document, maybe I've got some part-time admin people that are really, 50% of the time, they're in our biweekly pay period. So I could establish that their standard number of hours per pay period are 40, and that would correctly calculate out what their annualized pay would be. So when I do something like a compensation report, all of that information could be at our fingertips, and we don't have to, oh, wait a minute, Sally's part-time, let's back out part of her salary there, those kind of things. So we keep it in many different formats, but how we communicate it over to the Sage 300 payroll will really depend on, how your pay frequency and how it's set up there. Additional information on previous pay and performance increases, we can, performance ratings, we can track that as well. And we've got some more user-defined fields that I haven't really labeled out in my system. A lot of groups, especially in union environments, have to follow step increases for particular, pay grades that the employees are on based on their job date. So we can track that as well. I want to look at a little bit of information and make a distinction here. In the HRMS system, what we term as their job is really their occupation, what they do for a living out here. So here I've associated this employee as our VP of Finance, and behind the scenes what's happening is we've got our job codes set up, our job titles that pull information. And they'll have information regarding what the EEO classification are. So between the jobs portion or their occupation, that set up, and the employee's information when we looked at their ethnicity, age, et cetera, that helps us create our complete employee information for our EEO reporting. We're in configuring a system, we really want to define it to match up how your organization works. So in my demonstration system today, I've got a couple of org levels that we're using here, a division, a project, which would be associated with perhaps a job that you're doing in your timberline construction. So we can match that up. For him, it makes sense to have him at our corporate office, so I'm going to go ahead and change that because he's really works out of our corporate office, being in finance here. Let me move him again. Now it's asking me if I want to create a record for this data, and I do, because anytime I'm making a change to that, this information will go over to our job history. So we're creating that dynamic, complete historical database of where the employee has been in our organization. Okay? So if I move over now to our job history for Hugh, I can see when we've created or done changes to his information, whether it is his job title or we've done some wage increases here. We can see progressively how his wages increased and look at it in an annualized amount up there. We're creating this dynamic, complete employment history. So as we terminate or lay someone off and then come back and rehire them, we're creating that job history and having those historical dates in the system there. So that's just kind of a quick tour through some of the employee information in these first two tabs. I want to pop over now to a custom detail panel and talk about having a place for everything. So right now, when I talk to organizations, they perhaps don't have, if they don't have an HRMS system, they may be keeping information in a lot of various places, right? So they may have a spreadsheet or they've got a little piece of paper that they do all the little check off for all of the information to make sure that they've captured everything when they're hiring a person. So the beauty, one of the other beauties of the Sage HRMS system is if a field doesn't exist in the database, you can create one, and you can create these custom panels that track this information. So here I've got an onboarding checklist that we can populate, that I can document that this employee has signed off on their handbook, our company rules of conduct, our harassment discrimination policy, and some safety training. So this is just one example out here as we look at some other things in the system as we go through this tour. I would have you to start to think about, are you keeping spreadsheets? What are you keeping them on? You know, is this information, is it information that we could find a place for that already exists in the system, or can we work with you to design something so that it really reflects your needs as an organization? So the next area of the system I wanted to talk about is compliance reporting. So we looked at our information that we could capture from the employee portion of the data on the EEO information. That's where we voluntarily report ethnicity, age, and gender. And then the other components that make that up are based on the employee's occupation. And so for each company, you all have different job titles, job codes, and how you classify those is really specific to you. So that is something that on an implementation is really collected specific and established specific for your organization. So these are just some of the topics of information from a compliance standpoint that we can track. So let's jump back over into the system. We had already looked at capturing some of that data associated with the employee record, but let's take a look in the reporting area and just kind of highlight some of these reports that are out here. So being able to just through the click of a button come, you know, late summer, early fall when we're gathering our EEO information together, we don't have much to do except for get the report ready and say what was our comparative period if we had that. But we've also got additional analysis information and reports available to us. And as I indicated in when we were looking at assigning an employee to our organization, we have the ability, I'm going to select this termination detail report and take a moment to step back. Here on my demonstration system, I have a couple of employers set up. So each employer can be a separate EIN, or sometimes in construction and real estate, you may be operating under a single federal ID number, but you may have the system, your Timberline system set up to have multiple companies out there, and we can accommodate that as well. So when I run reports, I can select if I want to run this information on a specific company or multiple companies or for our entire enterprise. In this case, I'm going to select my DEU company, and I can now, as we saw those different organizational levels, perhaps I just want to look at information related to a specific division of our organization. So maybe I just want to look at the corporate division and run a report on the EEO termination detail based on that, or maybe it's against a specific project that we're doing, and we can bring these project information to have it match up with our Timberline system, or perhaps it's a specific location that the employee is working out of. Now, one of the organizational levels, as I mentioned, we always set up is that Timberline pay group. So perhaps I want to not look at this on a specific location, but I just want to look at it really for everybody who's a weekly payroll, or maybe I just want to look at it for some of my non-exempt staff. So let's go ahead and select maybe that one on just to look at our non-exempt staff. I can come over. Most reports have a specific criteria where you can determine, and I'm going to open up this period just so that I have some data in here, and I'm going to go ahead and preview this report. So each of the reports out here can have different specific criteria detail. When I look at benefit reports, I'm going to obviously get some different information or selections out there. But this has given us our turnover detail on these various, anybody that's been terminated throughout this period that is in my non-exempt classification. So a shout out about the reports available in the Sage HRMS system. You just saw I previewed. Obviously, I can print. Many of these I can export, and I can export them in several different formats. As I mentioned earlier, former payroll manager, so I love my Excel. So a lot of times if I want to look at the data and manipulate it, add additional fields, it may make sense to throw that out into that type of format right there. Another thing to note here as we're looking at our reports, I would take a quick look at the OSHA information. So we looked at that employee's record where we could track information on a employee accident. When we've got it associated with an employee's record and keeping it all in the system, it allows us to do several different things. One of those things is be able to report over multiple years. So if you're currently using the OSHA Excel workbook and you save a new workbook for each year and you put all of your documented in there, this system can do the same thing plus some. So we can look at and do analysis or reporting over multiple years. And when we go to run our OSHA, incident log for the year that we need to post between February and April, we can do that right out of the system and pull this information out and have it ready to post out there. So very powerful to be able to look at things over not only just the current period, but to do some analysis over a multiple year period here. Okay, so we've also got, as I mentioned, our VETS 100 reporting. If you are a federal contractor and you have to gather information for the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs, we can discuss ways that we can capture information from them as well. So that new disability self-identification report or information we've got to collect on the workers as well, we're able to track that information. So just a high level on our compliance reporting. So now let's go back to our list out here and talk about managing benefits. So, you know, it's wonderful that payroll can do our deductions for us, and also that they can do that fringe or that employer portion out there. But is it easy, you know, do you have a way to easily see, at looking at one screen, all of the benefits an employee's enrolled in and their dependents? Are you keeping these spreadsheets to reconcile to your insurance bills? Do you have benefits such as a long-term disability that maybe are a function of the employee's wage, maybe for the premium and the benefit itself? And wouldn't it be nice that if we processed a wage increase for the employee, that the system knew, well, that means they have an increase in their coverage and an increase in their premium, and so that the system is going to know these things. We've also, as I talked about just a little bit ago when we talked about having multiple companies in the system, sometimes you've got groups that are running as separate companies. They may or may not have the same federal ID number, but a lot of times maybe you're sharing benefit plans out there. So the way that the HRMS system works and how we establish these plans, we do a setup of the plan and use rate tables to calculate, you know, we've got an amount for the employee premium, and we can utilize rate tables to calculate things like the different dependent coverages. Then when we enroll employees and their dependents in the benefits, the system is automatically going to know how much the premium is and how much the employee should be contributing. So this is true also for establishing our plan rules for our 401ks and stuff like that. We talked about reporting just a minute ago, and I'm going to say cue the scary music out there. What is our least favorite task to be able to do where benefits are concerned? Mine was always that dreaded census report until I had a system like this Sage HRMS system, because we can very easily run this report. You know, my broker would usually ask for it last thing right as they were leaving the building because they knew it's such a yuck thing to have to put together. So just that easy, we've got a census report ready for the broker. We may want to make some changes to this information, so we may want to throw it in Excel. Maybe we only want to show the last 4 digits of the SOCH. We've also got capabilities. We're going to talk a little bit later about reporting, different reporting options with the Sage HRMS. But let's go ahead and look back into the employee's information and look at their benefits screen. So we're going back to my favorite employee here, Hugh. We're going to look at the benefits area. So first we're going to look at the insurance benefits. Now, I've had this demonstration system running a long time, so I've got a lot of historical information. But just with the click of the radio button here, I've now am just showing the plans that are only current and active plans for this employee. So when I go into this high deductible medical plan that he's enrolled in, I can see this is our high deductible plan. I can see when his coverage began. I've got the termination way out there. So part of the functionality of the system when I write a plan is I can do some auto-enrolling of people in the plan if we're not to a point where we want to do online benefits enrollment or things of that nature. But we're just tracking the information in here. And I've listed here in the cost and coverage, because it's table-driven, I'll just switch this little button so we can see these amounts. It knows based on the dependents he has enrolled in the plan and his premium how much it costs for the organization to insure this employee and his dependents and what their contribution is. So we've also got the detail on effective dates for start and stop for our dependents out here, which is important. Especially now with the changes that have happened in ACA, Affordable Care Act, and then if we look at if we're having to do our own HIPAA reporting or certificates of credible coverage out of the system, we can do that. And for those, we need to know the individual employee's start and stop date. So if Hugh was to have a joyous event where they've had a new child and we enroll a new dependent in the system, it's going to do the calculations and update that information, and that information is going to flow over to payroll in terms of what the employee's contribution amount is, and then also what the employer fringe cost is for that. So we can establish a lot of plans. You may be in a situation where you share a lot of benefits. They may be the same plans, but you may have different contribution rules depending on the different companies that the employees work with. And all of that is, the system is capable of managing that information quite handily as well. So that's just a high level here on the insurance benefits. And when we come over to Hugh's screen on his current benefits, we've got his 401k plan, and it's got his pre-tax amount that he's deferring on this. And then the system has done a little calculation to project out, based on what his annual salary is, how much he would be doing on a pre-tax basis and what the employer match theoretically would be. It's going to do actuals in your payroll processing is where that will happen. But I can keep historical information here too. I don't have much to show on him, but if he were to change his deferral amount and reduce that, and it's, next year in January, and we're doing our plan testing, and the first thing they come back with is, we show Hugh deferring 10%, but he didn't max out. We can look historically and say, well, for the first 3 months of the year, he deferred 2%, and then he increased his deferral amount. So really helpful in managing that. As I mentioned, we keep the dependents' information and beneficiary information in the system as well. You may decide that working, using this to manage your employee benefits works quite well. You may not be the type of organization that feels that an online benefits enrollment would be something that your workforce is well suited for, but you may want to have some additional functionality or benefits, doing things like automatically sending files for enrollment to carriers, right? So there is a module for that called the Benefits Messenger, where we can safely exchange that in the correct format directly. We use the service, and it goes to a secure site in the cloud, and they transmit the information securely to the insurance providers out there. But within the core system, we've got quite a bit of capabilities as far as that is concerned as well. So our next topic is managing time off plans. Okay? So what I hear sometimes from Timberline payroll users is that maybe the accruals, because the way their plans are set up, work just fine. But some employers have multiple plans, right? They may offer a particular plan to members that are in a specific union, or they may have to have negotiated a particularly more generous plan to get a particular executive to join their group. Or they may have seniority tiers in there that have some complexity where they limit carryover amounts, and that type of accrual just isn't well suited perhaps to the payroll. So a lot of times they come to us and say, can you help me, right? That's a big pain point. Or maybe the system's working fine that way, but I find it really hard to know, when they actually took the time. So, I mean, who hasn't had an employee in their office? I remember quite well one of my favorite employees would come to me each year right before her vacation was about to renew based on her anniversary date. And she would tell me I had to have done something wrong because she should have more vacation than this. And, obviously there was something going on. And so one of the beauties of managing the time off in the Sage HRMS system is that we can have these plans, and I could come into this record here and say, well, looks like you took 8 hours of vacation, on February 11th, or, perhaps this is when you spent 40 hours last summer, and inevitably she would say, oh, that's right, I went to Des Moines to visit that. I forgot about that. Some groups also track their holiday plans in here. I don't know if that is necessarily something that makes sense in a construction and real estate environment. I worked with a zoo where, of course, the animals don't they're not going to let the zookeepers take a holiday off. They needed care out there, so they track that via holiday plans. But you may have a floating holiday that you want your employees to be able to track. So we can have multiple plans set up in the system, and we'll look at some of those seniority tiers in a moment. But here we've just, once we assign that to an individual employee, as they take time against that plan, we can bring that information back in from payroll, or we can send the ending balance over so it can end up on your pay advices in your construction and real estate payroll, so that that is out there. So very useful to do that. I'll just take a quick moment and just come over here and look at a time off plan, and we'll pick a vacation plan out here. So let me pick one of my companies here that we used. And so I could have multiple plans. I could call them you know, a salaried vacation plan or just a PTO plan, roll everything into a bank. These can roll over on an annual basis, a calendar year, or maybe you want to use the employee's anniversary date, and we could be doing an accrual so much per month, or we could do a lump sum amount they get after being there a year, those kind of things. And we tell the system what the rules are. So right at beginning of hire, they start to earn up to a maximum amount of 40 hours per year. They can carry that over. After a year, that accrual rate can bounce up to 80 hours and so on and so forth. So, and we can also use, I alluded to that we have these multiple dates that we can use, and we could tell the plan that maybe we've got union employees and they need to be able to use an adjusted seniority date, things like that. So quite capable, the system's quite capable of managing all of that. And then on the flip side of that, besides managing it, is being able to report back on that information. So when I look at my attendance reports and being able to do a attendance detail report for my employees, so that we can look at all of that information of everything that's happened for these particular employees over the last year. Sometimes that might even be a good thing to run out there, look at that information on an annual basis to provide that to them, so it saves you those visits to your office where they're looking at, yeah, I should have had more time than that. So I've run this over multiple years here, but we could do the period where, you know, it's just, I just want to show them the transactions for the last year out there. Okay. So we're moving right along here. So we've talked about time off plans. I did want to mention, let me back up one moment, the FMLA. What I find a lot of employers are having problems with is being able to track intermittent leave, and perhaps they want to do that on a rolling 12 months, and the system is capable of doing that and tracking those. You know, I did 4 hours to take my sick mother to her chemotherapy this, you know, on this day, those kind of things. So we can really manage that quite well. So training. You know, there are several different ways in the HRMS system to track training, whether you may just be concerned from a corporate standpoint on tracking some of the major things, discrimination, harassment prevention, best practices in hiring, or things like that, or you may need to get more detailed, especially on safety training. You may have to do that or desire to do that where you're recording the training that's happened on an individual project. You may take the first day of the employees' first day on the project. They may go through several safety training courses that you are delivering internally, or you've got videos for them to watch, and you may need to track that information. We can do that in a couple of different ways in the Sage HRMS. It does have a specific training tracking module. Whether it makes sense for your group or not, we would really have to do some discussion in there. But how it works is we can set up requirements based on the employee's job title or occupation, where they're at in your organization. We can make certain classes required for everyone. But the system can track attendance at these, where you can go in and open a class, record the people that were there, and close that, and have it update multiple employees' training records, so that all this information is populating on, on the courses they've taken. We get all this historical information there, and we can see the ones they're enrolled in and the ones they've completed. You may have training programs that consist of several different courses out there you want to assign, or you may really be interested in tracking certifications and when those are due to expire, and how to make sure you've got everybody the most up-to-date on their certification. So the training module may make sense to do that in. It also, as I mentioned, there's a lot of times several different ways to track things in the system. Sometimes for employers that have smaller training requirements out there to do, they may want to track stuff in, maybe I just want to track that I had a few people attend this first aid certification class today, and I know, and I'm just right-clicking in the date field, and that is bringing me up the calendar, and I know that this CPR and first aid certification is good for 2 years, so now I've got a next due date on it. There's an alerting module that could send you and the employee and perhaps their manager alerts when they're going to need to get this redone. I could put in their certification number, the certificate out there as well. So that's another way to do it. Also, sometimes in our custom detail screen, it makes sense to do training this way. So in an example where you might be tracking it and you want to associate it with a particular job site or project that they're working on, this is an example where I could capture information based on that. I could also do it as little radio buttons where I could say the project that I'm working on, and did they take this particular training on this day? Is there a next due date? So a lot of different ways to manage that in the system. So I just want to highlight it's part of what we'll do in a discussion process where we'll make recommendations on what's the most effective way for you to track that information. And each organization is different when it comes to that. So reporting and workforce analysis, here's where these difficulties that we discussed really show kind of that ugly side. So as I mentioned, accounting background, I love Excel, but if you are generating reports or tracking information and being able to provide reports out here based on an Excel spreadsheet, then you have to go through the, oh boy, when was the last time I updated it? Is this the most current information? Or who had that report? Where was it on our network? Or, oh, that was on my workstation, the one that crashed last year, and I didn't save it on our network. So when we've got everything in the centralized HRMS database, not only does it have this library of just dozens and dozens of reports out here in various topic areas, so our compensation reports, so being able to do a ranked salary list quite easy. And when I talked about having, we might have part-time employees in there, so we want to make sure that we're correctly reflecting this information. So just that easily, I've got my active employees, I've got a ranked salary list for that. Maybe I want to go in and just look at a salary as of a certain date, maybe it was last year, or I want to run some of these analysis reports, turnover logs, things of that nature. The system does this beautifully. In the employee and organizational reports, we can do an anniversary list report, impersonal information reports. Our birthday list report we may send out. It just shows the date and month and date of the birthday, not the year. We could also do, probably the home mailing labels was one of my favorites that we used, and that'll do the labels nice 3-up for you out there. But This is one level. These are standard reports. We'll be able to filter down and look at specific areas of our employee database. Maybe I just want to look at one employee, and I could find that one employee I want to run the report on. Or maybe I want to run the report on several employees, but they don't share a same division or something like that. So I could select multiple employees just to run this particular mailing list on, and now I've got my 3 up labels for them. So able to do that. The next level of reporting that comes with the system is the secure query, and this allows us to write custom reports in 5 steps. It's a derivative of Crystal reports, but it uses field names as opposed to database field names. So I can just quickly select from a list. I put the report together one time. When I go to run it, next time it's updated with all the information. I may want to share this with some other members of our team, or I want to make it a private report that only my login can do. The third level of reporting that comes with the core system is Crystal Reports. And it comes with 2 licenses to write Crystal Reports, and we can create just many, many more reports. But it also comes with about 60 of the HR reports already done up in Crystal. So you don't have to recreate the wheel out there, but it may be a great starting point for you if you wanted to make a change to it and save it under a custom report file. So you may have your own company's custom reports that you've created out there, able to do that as well. So that's just a quick look at our reporting. I think the last thing that I wanted to cover before we open up to question and answer is talking about how the information moves around the system. So we focused today on the core HRMS system. We do have some self-service capabilities that are out there that we, happy to explore with you. It's got a built-in manager self-service component, so you could allow employees to do things like time off requests, etc. out there. But within the core system, we want to exchange information over to the CRE payroll. So we'll send things like new hire information on them to get that employee record populated in payroll. We can send over changes. They've got a new address, a new rate of pay. They made changes to their benefits. One of the beauties of the system is that it's date effective. So if I've gone through my open enrollment period from April 10th to April 20th, I've got everybody's paperwork back. I can make those changes in the system that are effective May 1. I can do this ahead of time, but the system, because the interface has some dating out there, is not going to send over those changes until they become applicable. So that's a very nice part. We've got an attendance component that will bring these transactions back in once we've paid them in CRE payroll, and we'll populate that attendance. And then we've also got integration with the self-service so that we can show the pay advices, pay stubs, and the time off back into the self-service component out there. So if you've got a very dispersed workforce and you want to get out of having to courier over paychecks or mail out paychecks, maybe you've got 100% participation in direct deposit. I'm going to pause for laughter there. Maybe you've got a good participation in direct deposit, and then you're using pay cards to pay the other employees that don't want to use direct deposit out there. We can send that information, those pay advices, over to self-service. They can capture that information themselves out there. Okay. I want to emphasize here, if you have any questions or you'd like to learn more about this, please contact your Alliance Solutions Group representative. They will reach out to us and establish a call so we can learn about your organization and how we might be able to help your group. And I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions at this time, if there are any.